It was the last summer before my last year of college. And I decided that I really wanted an adventure. I knew I needed to make money, so I figured I could go somewhere I'd never been before and get a job. I decided on the island of Nantucket off the coast of Massachusetts. Why? Because it was the only place I know of that has its very own limerick. There once was a man from Nantucket who kept all of his cash in a bucket, but his daughter, named Nan, ran away with a man. And as for the bucket, Nan tuck it. I figured that a place that had a limerick like that would possibly be the place where I might meet Prince Charming, the man with whom I would want to run away. Besides, my parents happened to know a couple, Bob and Erna Blair, who lived on the island of Nantucket. They hadn't seen each other in decades, but the Blairs said that they would be happy to have me board at their house for the summer. So I went to Nantucket, and I found a job at the Skipper restaurant, and I settled into the summer. It didn't take me long to find out that this was not going to be the summer when I was going to meet Prince Charming. I did have dates. I dated the sous chef at the Skipper restaurant. He was cute, and he liked to slip me little slices of bacon and strawberry tarts. I tried to ignore just how very young he seemed. And then we had our first date, and he took me to the house where he lived with his parents on the island of Nantucket. When they met me, they actually cooed and clapped their hands. Oh, look! Oh, he's brought home a mature one, a polite one. I didn't find that encouraging or in any way reassuring. And sure enough, after they toured me around their house and left me alone with their son, he and I realized that outside of the Skipper restaurant, we had absolutely nothing in common. So I started hanging out at the beach. And sure enough, I met a surfer. We lay on our beach towels, and he told me about each and every surfboard he had ever owned. And then he told me about each and every wave he had caught on the island of Nantucket that summer. I said, "Oh, have you ever surfed anywhere else besides Nantucket?" "Oh, sure. I've surfed all up and down the East Coast." "Oh, well, do you aspire to doing anything else?" "Oh, sure. I want to surf all up and down the West Coast." I said, well, is there anything else that you like to do? For instance, when it's bad weather? "Oh, it's always surfing weather somewhere." And then he must have noticed that my eyes had started to glaze over because he actually asked me a question. "Say, you want to learn how to surf?" "Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, that would be great." And so we took his surfboard out into the ocean. And that is where I learned that no matter what he did, whether he held onto that board with all his might or whether he let me do it on my own, whenever I went from lying down to trying to stand up or even kneel, I fell off the board. After a while, it started to make me snicker. And then I realized he was not snickering. He was gazing wistfully out toward the horizon. I decided the only thing for it, the only humane thing, was catch and release. I waved him a fond farewell, and I decided that there must be something else to do on that island that summer besides look for boys. So I started to take these long walks around the island. And that's when I found out that on the other side of the island from where I was living, there was this little house, and a whole room was dedicated to being a fabric shop. So I bought fabric and patterns and thread and took them home to the Blairs, where Erna said, of course I could use her dining room table to do the sewing and her sewing machine. And so on nights when I wasn't working, Bob would sit in the dining room with me, and we would discuss the relative merits and demerits of sous chefs and surfers, while I cut the patterns and pinned the fabric together. One Sunday, when I wasn't working, I was sitting in the living room along with Bob and Erna, reading our own books, when there was somebody knocking at the door. So Bob got up and went to answer it, and he came back with these two tall guys. He said, "This is Faith's brother, Howard. And this..." I didn't hear another thing. After "this is Faith's brother, Howard." Faith didn't live at the Blairs' house, but she did use their kitchen to bake the most exquisite desserts I had ever seen. They were gorgeous. They were aromatic. I never got a single taste of any of them, because Faith's summer job was to bake desserts that she sold to the island's restaurants. Faith was perfect. She was tall and slender, willowy even, and she had naturally wavy, beautiful hair. And Howard was a perfect complement as a brother. He was tall and slender, but not willowy. He was buff. And he had that same naturally wavy hair. Well, the two guys came into the living room and they sat down on the floor. I slid off my chair and sidled as close to Howard as I dared without being too conspicuous, just to keep an eye on him. I checked out the other guy too, but frankly, he was there to get Faith, so what difference did that make? The rest of the afternoon was spent with the two guys and Bob and Erna talking about the previous summer when they'd all worked together at the Island Theater. I noticed that Howard didn't seem to be getting as much into the nostalgia as the other three. In fact, the truth was I couldn't quite figure out what was interesting him, except that he really couldn't wait for Faith to be done in the kitchen. He had plans after they left. And finally she came out of the kitchen, and the two guys got up, and the three of them left without me. The next morning, I was getting ready to go to work. I was just turning off the shower when I heard somebody knocking at the door. And knocking again. And I realized that either Bob and Erna weren't home or they weren't where they could hear the door. I was going to have to answer it. So I pulled my clothes over my soaking wet body, ran downstairs, opened up the door, and there was the guy from the day before. Only it was not Howard. If there was going to be a guy at the door, why was it not Howard? I said, "I'm sorry, Faith doesn't bake on Mondays. She's not here." And I started to close the door. He said, No, wait. I didn't come for Faith. I came for you." I said, "Oh, good try at a save, but I have to get ready for work." And I started to close the door. He said, No, I mean it. I came to ask you if you would let me pick you up when you're done at the Skipper tonight. He was paying enough attention the day before to even notice that I worked at the Skipper restaurant. That was in his favor. Suddenly I realized that my long, stringy hair was leaving wet circles on the front of my t-shirt. I said, I have to work until after 11. That's fine, he said, I'll be there. And he was gone. I closed the door and I went looking for Bob. He was in the backyard in his garden. I said, Bob, you know that guy that was here yesterday, the one that's not Howard? What is his name? Bob said, oh, that's Bill. He was just, last summer he was here, but this year, just passing through. I went to work. At 11 o'clock, not Howard picked me up. And we walked all up and down the street of Nantucket. Up and down, it's one main street. For hours. And we never ran out of things to say. So we made plans to meet again the next day. The next morning, I went running to find Bob. I said, Bob, you know that guy, not Howard? He doesn't cook, and he doesn't surf, and he's not buff, but he sure is smarter than the average bear. He reads. And did you know he has blue eyes? The rest of the summer, which only had 2 weeks left, we spent every available moment together. And when that summer was over, my parents came to pick me up, and they invited Nat Howard to have dinner with us. And during that dinner, sitting at that table, he started fizzing about the fact that we had plans for the coming year, visiting each other. And my mother actually patted his arm and said, well, you know these summer things never last. For the first time since we had met, we were speechless. And then I had to wonder if she could be right. But as it turned out, he did come to Michigan to visit me, and I did go to Washington, D.C. to visit him, and we exchanged reams of papers. And at the end of a year, we got married. And when we did, I called him William, not Howard.